from divinity to darkness. Beelzebub is a name that echoes through centuries of fear, faith, and mythology. Known as the Lord of the Flies, he is often portrayed as a monstrous demon, a ruler of hell, and a bringer of plague, rot, and temptation. Yet his story is far older and far more complex than the fire and brimstone legends suggest. His origins trace back to the ancient city of Ekron, where he was once worshipped, not as a demon, but as a protective deity, possibly even a god of healing. Over time, through cultural clashes, religious reformations, and evolving theology, he was demonized, his name twisted, and his image reshaped into something grotesque. This transformation did not occur overnight. It was the result of centuries of religious conflict, political strategy, and theological evil. Beelzebub became a tool for one belief system to invalidate another. What was once sacred to one people was rebranded as wicked by another. In the Hebrew Bible, he appears as Beelzebub, a foreign god consulted by a disobedient king. In Christian Gospels, he becomes the prince of demons, accused of empowering exorcisms. In medieval grimoires, he is elevated further, one of the unholy trinity that governs the infernal realm. But behind every reinterpretation lies a deeper truth. Beelzebub is not merely a creature of myth, but a mirror of how societies define evil, power, and the other. He reflects not only the fears of disease and death, but the human tendency to vilify opposing beliefs. His association with flies is more than a symbol of decay. It represents the corruption of both the body and the soul, the slow rot that spreads when purity is replaced with indulgence. This documentary will unravel the many faces of Beelzebub. Each chapter will focus on a specific phase of his evil, to his vilification in Jewish scripture, his rise as a demonic prince in Christian theology, and his continued presence in occult writings and popular culture. This is not just the story of a demon, but the history of how gods fall and how names are weaponized. Through historical texts, religious scripture, and scholarly research, we will uncover the truth about Beelzebub beyond the myths, beyond the fear, into the heart of his legend. Origins. Beelzebub. Long before the name Beelzebub struck fear into the hearts of Christians, it belonged to a local deity in ancient This figure, Beelzebub, was worshipped in the city of Ekron, one of the 5 major Philistine capitals located in what is now modern-day Israel. In the Semitic tongue, the term Baal meant Lord or Master, a common title for deities in the region. Zebub, meanwhile, translates to flies, but this translation is not as simple or literal as it appears. Some scholars argue that the original title was Beelzebul, meaning exalted Lord or Lord of the High Place, a noble title later corrupted to Zebub as a form of mockery. This deity was not always associated with filth or pestilence. In his original form, Beelzebub may have been regarded as a god of healing, especially in the context of averting diseases often linked with insect plagues. The fly, in the ancient world, represented both destruction and life. It fed on decay, but its arrival often accompanied important cycles of death and rebirth in nature. In this light, Beelzebub could have symbolized control over life's darker forces, an intermediary between order and chaos. The most direct reference to Beelzebub appears in the Hebrew Bible. In the Book of 2 Kings, chapter 1. After suffering a severe injury, King Ahaziah of Israel sends messengers to Ekron to inquire of Beelzebub whether he will recover. This act of turning to a foreign god is condemned by the prophet Elijah, who announces that Ahaziah will surely die for this transgression. This biblical episode marks a pivotal moment. Beelzebub is not only identified as a rival deity, but is also placed in direct opposition to the God of Israel. From this point forward, his name becomes a symbol of spiritual betrayal. As monotheism strengthened its grip on the region, local gods, like Beelzebub, were systematically demonized. Their temples fell, their priests vanished, and their names were reshaped into warnings. Beelzebub, once a guardian, spirit or high god, was now rebranded as the embodiment of impurity. This early transformation laid the groundwork for his eventual assimilation into Christian demonology, where his legacy would become even darker. Demon King in Christian theology. With the rise of Christianity, Beelzebub's identity took on an entirely new dimension. No longer viewed as a distant, foreign deity, he was reinterpreted as a chief demon, second only to Satan himself. In the New Testament, His name appears during a confrontation between Jesus and the Pharisees, when Jesus casts out a demon from a possessed man. The religious leaders accuse him of doing so by the power of Beelzebub, whom they call the prince of demons. This exchange, recorded in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, reveals how Beelzebub had already become synonymous with ultimate evil by the 1st century. Jesus refutes their accusation, asking how Satan could drive out Satan, suggesting that a house divided against itself cannot stand. But the damage is done. Beelzebub, by association, is now firmly linked with demonic power. Early Christian thinkers, including church fathers like Origen and Jerome, began incorporating Beelzebub into the growing framework of demonology. No longer just a corrupted god of a rival religion, he was now an active adversary in the spiritual war between good and evil. By the medieval period, Beelzebub's status within the hierarchy of hell became fully developed. In several particularly the Dictionnaire Infernal by Jacqueline de Plancy and the Lesser Key of Solomon, Beelzebub is described as one of hell's supreme rulers, often ranked alongside Lucifer and Leviathan. He commands vast legions of demons and governs the sin of gluttony, corruption, and decay. He is considered the chief of hell's cabinet, a strategist of temptation and moral rot. His visual depictions reflect his symbolic decay. Medieval art portrays Beelzebub as a grotesque, winged monster, often covered in flies or with a bloated, rotting body. The image of the fly drawn to filth and death became a powerful metaphor. In spiritual terms, Beelzebub represented the soul consumed by excess, filth, and indulgence. He was the personification of slow, invisible corruption. In this Christian framework, Beelzebub was no longer just a name from an old scripture. He was a real and present danger. Prayers, exorcisms, and rituals were crafted specifically to protect believers from his influence. He stood not only as a symbol of impurity, but as proof that evil could infiltrate even the holiest of places through deception and doubt. The hierarchy of hell, Beelzebub's infernal authority. In the complex hierarchy of Christian demonology, Beelzebub holds a position of exceptional power. While many demons are confined to minor roles or represent specific vices, Beelzebub operates at the very top. He is often described as second only to Lucifer and, in some traditions, as part of an unholy trinity that includes Lucifer and Astra. This trio governs hell not just as a place of torment, but as a realm of organized rebellion against divine law. Beelzebub's rank is not merely symbolic. According to medieval texts, like the Grimoire of Pope Honorius and Pseudomonarchia Demonum by Johann, he commands thousands of demonic legions. These legions are structured like military units, each with specific tasks: temptation, corruption, chaos, or deception. Beelzebub, as the overseer, is believed to supervise operations targeting the moral collapse of human society. He is not a demon of wild destruction but of strategic decay, slowly unraveling values from within. His dominion extends over gluttony, filth, and the obsessive pursuit of indulgence. The association with flies enhances this theme. Flies gather where things rot. Beelzebub does not create destruction. He thrives in it. He does not strike openly but waits until decay begins, then takes control. In this role, he symbolizes corruption that appears small at first, indulgence, laziness, but ultimately leads to collapse. Theologians from the 16th and 17th centuries further enriched this profile. Beelzebub was said to whisper thoughts of excess into the ears of rulers and clergy, feeding vanity and appetite. He was blamed not only for personal sin, but for societal decay. During the witch hunts in Europe, many accused witches were said to have invoked Beelzebub in their rituals. Confessions extracted under torture described him as appearing in monstrous forms, offering forbidden knowledge in exchange for loyalty. His influence even reached into exorcisms. In several recorded cases, Catholic priests identified Beelzebub as the possessing entity within afflicted individuals. These reports describe him as proud, cunning, and unwilling to leave. His voice, according to those present, was often described as arrogant, deep, and filled with contempt. Thus, Beelzebub's power is not measured by brute force, but by his ability to corrode the human soul, slowly but surely. In hell's infernal order, he is the architect of spiritual ruin, patient, methodical, and devastatingly effective. Beelzebub in occultism and ritual magic. As European interest in the occult grew during the Renaissance and Enlightenment periods, Beelzebub became a central figure in grimoires, magical rites, and ceremonial texts. Unlike theological depictions that framed him solely as an adversary, occult traditions treated him as a powerful spirit who could be summoned, bargained with, or even coerced through complex rituals. His name appeared alongside other high-ranking demons in books that blended mysticism, astrology, alchemy, and ancient lore. One of the most influential texts, the Lesser Key of Solomon, particularly in its section known as Ars Gold, lists 72 demons said to be controlled by King Solomon through divine seals. While Beelzebub is not among the original, later editions and commentaries included him as a superior ruler, a force above the others, whose presence was invoked by advanced magicians seeking knowledge or dominion. His name was associated with offerings, oaths, and elaborate symbols designed to call his attention without provoking wrath. Beelzebub's role in these traditions is often contradictory. In some accounts, he is portrayed as willing to reveal hidden truths, such as the nature of the soul, forbidden sciences, or the fate of nations. In others, he is depicted as deceitful, offering half-truths or demanding sacrifices in return. Occultists warned that invoking Beelzebub was not for the unclean. His power was considered too dangerous for amateur magicians, and missteps during summoning could lead to possession, madness, or death. His sigil, a unique geometric symbol used to summon or represent him, became widespread in various magical traditions, drawn within protective circles and reinforced with invocations. This symbol served as a gateway between the material and infernal worlds. Alongside the sigil were rituals involving specific incense, planetary hours, and spoken commands in ancient tongues. Beelzebub's connection to air and decay often influenced the sensory elements of these rites. Foul smells, buzzing sounds, or a sudden change in temperature were interpreted as signs of his presence. Some sects of black magic even elevated Beelzebub as an object of veneration, praising his dominion over mortal weakness and worldly pleasure. In these belief systems, he was not a villain, but a liberator offering freedom from religious restraint through the embrace of desire and indulgence. Thus, in occultism, Beelzebub was not merely a demon of fear, but a key figure in the search for hidden knowledge, transformation, and power, one cloaked in secrecy, danger, and deep esoteric symbolism. Cultural legacy and modern interpretations. In modern times, Beelzebub's image has transcended ancient texts and ritual circles, finding a new life in literature, music, film, and pop culture. He no longer exists solely as a feared figure of religious doctrine or arcane. Instead, he has become a symbol sometimes serious, sometimes satirical of chaos, rebellion, and moral inversion. Yet even these playful or fictional portrayals echoed the centuries-old themes of corruption, arrogance, and power. One of the most notable literary appearances of Beelzebub comes from Paradise Lost by John Milton. In this 17th-century epic poem, Beelzebub is portrayed as Lucifer's closest ally, a fallen angel who shares his master's disdain for heaven's authority. Here, he is rational, persuasive, and dangerous not because of brute force, but because of his cunning and eloquence. Milton's depiction humanized Beelzebub, giving him a voice and a reason, which made him all the more compelling as a symbol of rebellion and philosophical defiance. In the 20th century, Beelzebub became a familiar name in horror fiction and occult-themed media. Films, novels, and comic books often feature him as either a main antagonist or a dark influence operating behind the scenes. His presence in The Exorcist, while indirect, inspired many similar depictions of demonic possession attributed to high-ranking infernal beings. Meanwhile, television series and games such as Supernatural, Diablo, and Lucifer reimagined him with varying degrees of menace and irony, reflecting shifting public attitudes toward demons as threats, metaphors, or even musicians and artists have also invoked Beelzebub's name. The song Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen famously includes the line, "Beelzebub has a devil put aside for me," embedding his mythos into mainstream consciousness. This usage is emblematic of how his name, once considered dangerous to speak aloud, has become part of everyday language, often stripped of its historical weight. Despite these transformations, the essence of Beelzebub's character remains intact. He is still associated with decay, physical, moral, or spiritual. Even when fictionalized or parodied, his name suggests something unclean, cunning, and influential. He is rarely portrayed as a mindless monster, but rather as a thinker, a schemer, and a master of seduction. In this cultural evolution, Beelzebub has become more than a demon. He is a lasting archetype of temptation, of corrupted wisdom, and of the ever-present shadow in human nature. Psychological symbolism and moral allegory. Beyond his religious and cultural representations, Beelzebub also holds significance in psychology and moral philosophy. Scholars and thinkers have used his image to explore the darker dimensions of the human mind, particularly those related to temptation, obsession, and spiritual decay. In this context, Beelzebub is not merely an external being but an internal force, a reflection of the impulses that lead individuals away from integrity, discipline, and clarity of thought. Carl Jung, though he did not reference Beelzebub directly, laid the foundation for interpreting demonic figures as archetypes of the unconscious. In Jungian psychology, demons often represent repressed desires, unacknowledged trauma, or moral contradictions. Under this lens, Beelzebub can be viewed as the personification of hidden decay, an aspect of the psyche that festers when neglected. His association with flies and rot metaphorically aligns with the mental and emotional consequences of ignoring personal responsibility, indulging in destructive behavior, or denying one's own weaknesses. Moralists and theologians have long used Beelzebub as a cautionary figure. He represents not the immediate fall from grace, but the slow erosion of conscience. His temptations are subtle gluttony masquerading as comfort, apathy disguised as peace, self-indulgence misread as freedom. This slow corruption aligns with how moral failures often unfold in real life, not through one catastrophic decision, but through a series of small compromises. Writers and philosophers have used Beelzebub to ask where the boundary lies between human weakness and deliberate evil. In some works, he becomes a symbol of the rationalization of voice that justifies wrongdoing as necessary or deserved. In this form, he is not monstrous in appearance, but dangerously reasonable. He speaks with intelligence, not rage. He appeals to pride and ego rather than brute terror. Some psychological interpretations even suggest that Beelzebub represents the fear of contamination not just of the body, but of the soul. His association with flies and filth touches on deep-seated human anxieties about purity, mortality, and the fragility of order. As such, invoking Beelzebub is not just a confrontation with evil, but with the part of ourselves most vulnerable to decay. In this deeper symbolic framework, Beelzebub is more than a demon or myth. He is a mirror, a reflection of how easily ideals can rot, how slowly corruption spreads, and how seductively the voice of decay can sound when it wears the mask of logic. Beelzebub and the spread of fear. Throughout history, the name Beelzebub has been used not only to describe a spiritual adversary, but also to instill fear and reinforce authority. In many religious and political systems, the concept of a supreme demon served as a tool to control behavior, define moral boundaries, and justify a harsh punishment against those who strayed from the accepted norms. Beelzebub's transformation into a demon king was part of a broader strategy to categorize evil, personify it, and make it identifiable to the common believer. During the Middle Ages, when superstition and religious dogma dominated public life, belief in demonic influence was widespread. Beelzebub's name was invoked in sermons, court trials, and inquisitions. He was not an abstract concept, but a real and dangerous presence believed to dwell in the hearts of heretics, witches, and sinners. Clergy used his image to stoke fear, warning that even small acts of disobedience could open the door to his influence. The fear of Beelzebub became a powerful psychological weapon, one that kept populations obedient and aligned with church teachings. This fear extended into the infamous witch hunts of the 15th to 17th centuries. Under torture, accused witches often confessed to making pacts with Beelzebub. These confessions, though forced, shaped public perception. Beelzebub was portrayed as a tempter who offered power and pleasure in exchange for loyalty. He was said to appear at witches' sabbaths, often in beastly forms, receiving worship and instructing followers in dark arts. Even though these descriptions were constructed under duress and guided by leading questions, they were accepted as proof of his activity on earth. In these trials, Beelzebub represented more than just sin. He symbolized rebellion against the religious and social order. To name him was to name chaos. To accuse someone of serving him was to strip them of humanity. This tactic of dehumanization allowed brutal punishment to be justified in the name of salvation. Over time, as scientific understanding expanded and superstition declined, the literal belief in Beelzebub's earthly manifestations faded, but the legacy of fear remained. his name continued to be used to label ideological enemies, spiritual dangers, and psychological threats, whether invoked in the pulpit or whispered in Beelzebub's image endured not because people always believed in him, but because the fear he represented remained deeply rooted in human consciousness. Beelzebub in comparative religion. Beelzebub's identity does not exist in isolation. Across different cultures and belief systems, similar figures appear entities associated with disease, decay, forbidden knowledge, and spiritual danger. These comparisons reveal that Beelzebub is part of a larger pattern, the transformation of once revered gods into demons when empires shift, ideologies clash, or new religions rise to dominance. In Mesopotamian mythology, for example, the god Nergal held dominion over war, plague, and the underworld. Like Beelzebub, Nergal was feared for his association with death and disease, and yet he was also worshipped for his power to protect and to destroy enemies. When Judeo-Christian traditions emerged and spread, gods like Nergal were dismissed as false idols, or recast as demonic. In Zoroastrianism, the principle of evil is embodied in Angra Mainyu, also known as a spirit of chaos and decay who opposes the god Ahura Mazda, though not directly linked to Beelzebub. Ahriman's traits corruption, darkness, and spiritual pollution, the characteristics later attributed to both figures reflect the ancient fear of invisible corruption, whether physical or moral. Even in Hinduism, where the concept of absolute evil is less prominent, there are asuras and Rakshas, powerful beings often in opposition to the gods. These figures, though sometimes capable of wisdom, are generally portrayed as self-indulgent, destructive, and obsessed with earthly pleasures. They reflect a similar moral framework, where the abandonment of balance and discipline leads to ruin. The pattern is clear. When a dominant belief system rises, the deities of rival systems are rebranded as demons. Beelzebub, originally a god of healing or high status in Philistine religion, was turned into a figure of revulsion in Abrahamic traditions. This process served not only to elevate one theology, but to invalidate another, turning cultural difference into moral danger. In modern comparative religion studies, Beelzebub's evolution is a prime example of theological reinterpretation. It illustrates how religious identity can be shaped by conquest, fear, and ideological necessity. The transformation of Beelzebub into the demonic Beelzebub is not just a spiritual story, it is a political one, rooted in the battle for meaning and control. Thus, Beelzebub stands as both a demon and a testimony, a reminder that gods fall, and that history is often written by those who cast their rivals as monsters. Conclusion. The eternal shadow of Beelzebub's legacy stretches far beyond religion. He is not confined to the pages of sacred texts, nor locked within the grimoires of his presence remains embedded in culture, language, psychology, and human imagination. Over centuries, he has shifted shape from a local deity to a prince of demons in Christian theology, to a symbolic figure in literature and modern media. Each transformation adds complexity to his character, reflecting the changing fears, desires, and moral landscapes of human society. As the Lord of the Flies, Beelzebub became the embodiment of decay, not only physical rot, but the moral and spiritual decline that occurs slowly, often without notice. He does not scream, he whispers. He tempts not with terror, but with ease, indulgence, and rationalization. This makes him more dangerous than demons of brute violence. He offers comfort before corruption, satisfaction before surrender. His power lies in subtlety. In religious thought, Beelzebub represents the enemy within. He is the warning that evil doesn't always arrive with horns and fire. Sometimes it begins with a compromise, a whisper in the conscience, or a failure to act. This internalization of his role is why he remains relevant in modern discussions, not as a literal demon, but as a metaphor for the forces that erode principles and clarity from within the human soul. In psychology, he serves as an archetype of shadow, the collection of desires and tendencies that people reject, hide, or fear to confront. In literature and film, he has been used to explore themes of temptation, power, rebellion, and moral ambiguity. Even in parody or fiction, his name carries weight. It signals that something darker is lurking beneath the surface. Ultimately, Beelzebub's story is not only about theology or folklorette, is about transformation. His identity was shaped by the fears of civilizations, the strategies of priests, and the imaginations of artists. He is a god who became a demon, a symbol who became a warning, a name that became eternal. And so, the legend of Beelzebub continues not because people still summon him in the dark, but because he represents something timeless, the part of human nature that can fall, that can rot, and that must be faced with honesty before it takes control.